Person-first language. Why do people say people experiencing homelessness? What's the difference between saying autistic person and saying person with autism? Person-first terminology aims to put someone's personhood before their condition. The ARC, a nonprofit which advocates for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities and their families, says that, quote, by placing the person first, the disability is no longer the primary defining characteristic of an individual, but one of several aspects of the whole person. Even the CDC advocates for using person-first language. The main argument for person-first language is the emphasis of personhood. Instead of saying, that disabled kid, or the mentally ill, which proponents argue dehumanize people with disabilities and or mental illnesses, we should use their condition as a descriptor, not a definition. The Texas Council for Developmental Disabilities shares this view and writes, what do you call people with disabilities? Friends, neighbors, coworkers, dad, grandma, Joe's sister, my big brother, our cousin, Mrs. Schneider, George, husband, wife, colleague, employee, boss, reporter, driver, dancer, mechanic, lawyer, judge, student, educator, homeowner, renter, man, woman, adult, child, partner, participant, member, voter, citizen, amigo, or any other word you would use for a person. Still, many advocates and self-advocates prefer what's called identity-first language. For them, their condition is part of their identity. It is a definition, not just a descriptor. Kara Leibowitz writes for The Body Is Not an Apology, quote, the idea of separating the disability from the person stems from the idea that disability is something you should want to have separated from you, like a rotten tooth that needs to be pulled out. My friend of 12 years was recently diagnosed with autism. They wished to remain anonymous, but agreed to give a written statement summarizing their opinion of person-first versus identity-first terminology. They write, quote, it doesn't seem like a big deal. I didn't understand why it was a big deal at first, but the idea is sort of this. Person-first language assumes autism is bad. It treats autism as an add-on to who you are, assuming that you would be different, presumably better, without autism, and that the person you would be without autism is the real you. So the reason I, and a lot of people, tend to prefer identity-first language isn't really that it makes a huge semantic difference, but that making the conscious choice to use it, when person-first language might be expected, shows that we feel that we are who we are right now with autism. Sort of that our autism defines us, and that's good and bad at the same time, but we're not less ourselves because we're autistic.
A lot of people who support identity-first language are proponents of the idea that the identities that person-first language tries to separate from basic humanity are too integral to be ignored and not negative attributes. Identity-first autistic celebrates the rich experience that autism brings to the lives of autistic people. Many people who have experienced homelessness at some point in their life describe themselves as a homeless person. There's a big movement in the deaf community to celebrate deaf culture, sign language, and to see deafness not as a disability, but as any other part of a person's identity. So people often prefer deaf person to person with hearing loss. Using identity-first language doesn't mean using dirty or offensive language. It is a different approach to what phrasing is most empowering. According to a study done by Kenny et al., the term autistic was endorsed by a large percentage of autistic adults, family members, friends, and parents, but by considerably fewer professionals. Person with autism was endorsed by almost half of professionals, but by fewer autistic adults and parents. We observed a similar trend in our research, in which individuals with mental illness or autism preferred to identify with their condition, while professionals such as the CDC advocated for person-first language. This difference in language preference is also echoed in the study by Chambers et al., who argue that there is no one correct way to build and maintain a positive identity. Similarly, there is no one correct way to refer to people with autism, mental illness, homelessness, or autistic, mentally ill, homeless people. So what do we advise that you say? As a basic rule, default to the standards set by the CDC and try to use person-first language. If you know someone who has a mental illness, a developmental difference, or is experiencing homelessness, and you feel comfortable enough to ask them what language they prefer you use, do that. If you don't feel comfortable asking, try mirroring the language that the person uses to talk about themselves and their condition, whether that be person first, identity first, or a mixture of the two. The language that we use matters. For me, saying people experiencing homelessness makes me focus on that person's humanity first instead of their condition. The noticeable difference from mainstream language often inspires others to reflect on their perspectives as well. At the same time, embracing identity first language eliminates the stigma that surrounds conditions. Instead of assuming that the person's condition is a negative aspect of their identity, when it may be something that they fully embrace as simply a part of who they are. Both person first and identity first language proponents are trying to get at the idea that the people with these conditions are defined by so many things beyond what can be captured in one label. While a condition is a facet of someone's identity, it is not their entire identity. Whatever language we choose to use should be employed as a way to celebrate the complexities of each individual and champion our shared humanity.